I'm Teisha Bader, and in the news, the Hebrew College in Newton, Massachusetts, celebrating its centennial year. Founded in 1921, this pluralistic institution of Jewish studies is led by Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anisfeld, who's been named to Newsweek's list of top 50 influential rabbis in America and named one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world by the Jerusalem Post. We are thrilled to have her here with us on JBS to talk about this institution, its past, present, and future. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today from Newton.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you.
Thank you. So before we get to the history of Hebrew College, I'd really love to ask about your history. What led you to becoming a rabbi and what led you to this institution ultimately?
Well, it's a wonderful question, and the answer somehow changes every time I think about the question. But I really started thinking about becoming a rabbi at an embarrassingly young age. Probably I was about 12 or 13, and I was just captivated. I was one of the few children in North America who loved Hebrew school and loved religious school. And I was captivated by Torah study, by prayer. And even though there were no women rabbis at the time, I didn't have any models, but I give my parents a lot of credit for the fact that they never for a moment discouraged me or made me question that. So I started thinking about it from a young age, again, first because of my interest in Torah study and in prayer. And then as I got older, as I graduated from high school, I went and spent some time in Israel. And that sort of strengthened, in particular, I think strengthened my sense of identification with the Jewish people as really being at the heart of how I wanted to move in the world and anchor myself in the world. When I went to college, I went to Brown as an undergraduate, and I became more engaged in social action and social justice work. But again, from that perspective, also the rabbinate felt like a wonderful way to give expression to those values and those concerns. So it just continued to be a thread for many years. And can I tell a story in answer to the question?
Of course.
I often think of sort of a pivotal moment. First of all, when I started at Brown, I remember meeting with my freshman advisor the first week of college, and he said, do you have a sense of what you want to do professionally? And I said, I think I want to become a rabbi. And he said, don't worry, you'll grow out of it. So that probably strengthened my determination to do it. But then a couple years after I had graduated from college, I was spending a little bit of time in South America, in Nicaragua, Central America, doing some solidarity work. And I remember I was down with a group called the Martin Luther King Brigade. And I remember sitting in Managua and watching the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech. And thinking this man, this individual is speaking from a place, the work he's trying to do is from a place of such deep love and connection and commitment. And I want whatever I do to be coming from that sort of deep place of love and commitment and connection. And for me, that meant doing that work in the Jewish community. And so that was really, it was right after I came back from there that I said, okay, it's time to go to rabbinical school. And then I worked for many years. I went to rabbinical school in Philadelphia at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, was ordained in 1990, worked for about 15 years in Hillel at Tufts, and then Yale for about a decade, and then Harvard for a couple of years, and then came to Hebrew College, first in part-time in 2003 and full-time in 2005.
Wow, I love your story. That really gave me chills. And your passion obviously runs deep and guides you at this institution. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's talk, though, about the history, since it's this really momentous milestone. I did not know very much about Hebrew College, to tell you the truth, and I was really impressed on your website. There's a link to a newspaper from 1921, which is so interesting to see. It was then called the Hebrew Teachers College, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
The first of its kind in the United States. This was like a major step because it meant teachers weren't being sought after from Europe. Is that the case?
Well, they were. It was not a rejection of bringing teachers from Europe. In fact, a very important part of the history was bringing refugees from Europe who did come here and go into teaching. But yes, it was part of a small group of Hebrew colleges founded around the same time. And it was first and foremost, really, in a way, sort of as you're suggesting, a revolution in Jewish education. And, you probably saw this in the newspaper article, you read the things that the founders of the college were saying, and they were looking around at the state of Jewish education and saying, if we don't do something now, we are really going to be looking at a crisis in Jewish education as we look towards the next generation, that we need to be investing in and training teachers who are committed to high quality Jewish education in this country. And so, yeah, I talk about getting the chills. I get the chills when I read some of their comments because there's such a deep sense of the impact that a teacher can make in the life of a child, in the life of an individual of any age, and really the exponential impact that generations of teachers can make. And so that commitment to education and to preparing teachers and leaders to educate the next generation has really been sort of at the heart of the institution from the very beginning.
And talk a bit about some of the programs. I know there are a lot of programs planned to mark the centennial. Some are already underway, like the art exhibit you have. You can talk about that. The theme of the centennial is Remember, Renew, Reimagine. So let's just talk about the theme for a second. What is the main idea that you're really hoping this momentous occasion will bring across to the public?
Yeah, thank you. It's a wonderful question. I think at the very heart of it is to convey and celebrate the way in which the college has embodied this quality of and this commitment to renewal at every critical juncture in its history. And I think it's really the reason that the college has not only survived but thrived when a lot of those other colleges have not. And in some ways you could say that's, the heart of what Jewish survival is all about, right? Is that capacity for renewal. So I think renewal is at the heart of it, but it's both remembering how the college has done that at various points in its history, and it's reimagining how we're going to do that now. So, and just to speak to a couple of the specifics that you alluded to, first of all, the emphasis on arts and culture, which has been a part of the college really in different ways throughout its history, but it's something we've recommitted to in recent years. And you can immediately sense how much artistic expression and creativity is an embodiment of that value of renewal, right? We have an amazing art exhibit downstairs right now, which is it's artwork created by Anita Rabinoff Goldman, a wonderful artist, and she created a quilted piece of artwork for every single Parsha, every single Torah portion, as she spent a year going through in-depth study of the Parshiot. And so, it's a wall filled with these images, but of course what the images are is really visual midrash, right? And so renewal in that sense, the renewal of Torah, by celebrating sort of the creative eye and the creative interpretation that this artist brings, but also the creative eye and creative interpretation that every person who sits in our Beit Midrash brings as they gather around the table and contribute their voices to the process of Torah. So that's one very specific manifestation. Another, I'll just give an example, is we have a centennial volume coming out that's co-edited by Rabbi Arthur Green, who's the rector of our rabbinical school, and two of our most esteemed alumni, Dr. Jonathan Sarna and Dr. Michael Fishbane, and the three of them have co-edited this volume, and the volume is called Chidushim, which in Hebrew means new insight, renewals, and new insights. It's picking up in a way on a teaching from the Talmud that says, "Ein Beit Midrash belo chidush." There is no such thing as a Beit Midrash that doesn't have chidush, that doesn't have something new happening in it, and that's because the measure of a Beit Midrash is really the extent to which it invites the living voices of the people sitting around the tables to join the voices that are on the pages of our sacred texts, and to continue to create Torah through that process. So those are some of the themes that we're working with and really trying to highlight and celebrate in different ways throughout the year.
I love how you put that, new voices joining the voices of the text. That's really a beautiful way to just describe it. Speaking of new things, you're also going to be breaking ground on a new location very soon. Talk a bit about that. It's going to be on the grounds of another institution, and how you would like to see that ultimately exist together.
Yeah. Well, it's a very exciting moment because you're right. We're about 2 weeks away from the site prep has begun, and we're about 2 weeks away from starting construction, God willing, and we'll be celebrating with a groundbreaking ceremony on December 5th. So the vision for the new campus, when I started as president 3.5 years ago, I should say, the building that we're in now, which is the third building that we've been in over the last 100 years. The building that we are in now had been sold. And so one of my challenges coming into this role as president was to work with people to figure out where we would be going. And that was really partly about envisioning this next chapter as we launch into the beginning of our second 100 years. So there are a lot of different ways to tell the story of how this vision evolved, which I'm really excited about. But one way I would say it is that we knew that we needed a future home that would, on the one hand, be affordable, that would be fiscally responsible and really optimize the resources of the community, which is so generous in supporting us, and at the same time would really feel like an exciting new vision. Not just a sort of contraction, but an exciting new vision. And so the idea that began to emerge was the idea of a shared campus. And we found both a wonderful location and a wonderful partner in a local synagogue, Temple Re'im, a conservative synagogue, where one of our rabbinic alumni has been serving for the last several years. And they also were drawn to this idea of a shared campus that would really both optimize resources and create new synergies and new programmatic energy and ideas. So that's where it began. But as we began to develop the idea, it really broadened, and so we are now I'm really excited to say we're now able to bring together about 8 partners on this new campus. We're lucky that already there next door to the synagogue is a wonderful pluralistic community mikveh, Maim Chaim, mikveh and education center, and really a model, a national model. And so they were already there. And then we started to work with some of our other sort of sister organizations, partners in town. And so we'll be bringing, we'll be partnering with J Arts, which is a really wonderful Jewish organization that advocates for and celebrates and supports arts in the Jewish community and beyond. Keshet, which is a national LGBTQ advocacy inclusion organization working in the Jewish community, based in Boston, but also national. Jewish Women's Archive, a new, relatively new project in Jewish meditation movement, contemplative practices. We're going to have a yoga meditation space on the new campus. And Kesher, which is a pluralistic after-school program, really wonderful program that already meets in the synagogue. So essentially, I don't want to leave anybody out. I won't go on and on, but you can get the feel. And for me, the heart of the vision, a couple of things that are at the heart of the vision. The very heart of it is that we're living in a time when we need to open lots of different doorways to Jewish life. For some people, the synagogue doorway is still a very important, very vital doorway, but there are other people for whom that won't be the way in. It may be through the arts, or it may be through movement and meditation, or it may be through, social activism or creative ritual or whatever it is. So it's really a shared campus vision that says, let's open a lot of different doorways to Jewish life. And then this is the part that's so critical for Hebrew College, and then make sure that there are opportunities at all of those doorways for learning, for growth, for deepening people's engagement, because it's so important to be welcoming and to open people into those different doorways, but it's also important to meet them and give them an opportunity for real, both for personal learning and growth, but also for real content-rich community and connection. So that's the idea.
It's really impressive, and it really strikes me, as you've said, one of the goals of your institution is this pluralistic, inclusive way of opening, having this wide tent, as they say in Judaism sometimes. And it sounds like by virtue of needing to move, you've created this incredible tent, which maybe you didn't realize was going to happen from the beginning. It seems like it just rippled, affected, and just sort of doors began to open and come together. And it really sounds so exciting. And as you said, allowing so many different kinds of access for people to engage.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you're also absolutely right in saying, we knew the values that were guiding our process in thinking about where we would be moving, and we knew we were drawn to this idea of something shared, but we really couldn't have envisioned, just the extent to which the idea would take off. And so it was partly about sort of being open to the unfolding vision, being lucky with just both the number of organizations that were interested, the kind of organizations that were interested, the level of community support. And I will say, I think a lot of us are maybe a little bit tired of the language of silver linings, but there was something interesting. There was a silver lining connected to the pandemic, which is that we and so many organizations were also thinking differently about physical space. and about how we might sort of continue to work both in person and remotely after the pandemic. And so that enabled, again, not only we knew we needed to move, but for some of these organizations, they weren't envisioning that. But then, the opportunity became more compelling. So.
Right. I want to also just touch on some of the things you said about the kind of work you do and what motivates you. And in the world today, you've said that there's a quote of yours that I'd love to read. You said, "As we are buffeted daily by news of violence, cruelty, ignorance, and intolerance in our nation and around the world, I'm grateful to be part of an institution where love of teaching and learning of Torah is at our core, and where we strive to make our study an act of sacred service to a world in need of healing and hope." So how do you integrate that idea when you're training teachers, when you're training future educators? How do you infuse that into what you teach and hopefully what they will then go on and teach?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's come and visit. First of all, that's, obviously that's lifelong work. I guess I would say, let me try to answer it in a couple of ways. First, just briefly, I would really connect it to this vision for the shared campus, and because that's one of the things that's been very moving about this process is, we're living in a world where very often partnership, collaboration is really challenging and really not sort of culturally invited and encouraged, right? There's often a sense of competition and scarcity, and so being part of a group that of organizations that are saying we have to learn to work together more effectively for the good of the wider community, for the good of the wider world, to recognize that we're part of a greater whole. That's definitely one very concrete way in which I feel personally that that this project is an expression of the quote you just read, and an expression, sort of an act of, it's really a deeply spiritual project for me, and an act of sort of healing and hope. So that's that specifically, but more broadly, this is manifest in so many different ways in the work that we're doing. Our educational work, by the way, is sort of in two main areas. One area is preparing Jewish leaders, so rabbis, cantors, and educators, and preparing Jewish leaders in this ethos, bringing the values of love of Torah, learning across difference, communal responsibility, creativity, bringing those values to everything that we do, both within our classrooms, within our Beit Midrash, and in our service to the community. And then the other side of our educational programming is our work in community education. And that's about half of what we do, actually. I love that mix at the college, that we're really deeply involved in this work of preparing leaders, but we're also serving thousands of people in the community every year, teens, adults, professionals, with all kinds of learning opportunities, classes, informal, formal, etc. So, and there too, we're trying to bring these same values to bear, of love of Torah and community responsibility and learning across difference and Jewish creativity. Those are sort of the core values. The one other thing I would say, part of the way that I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple of years, is that we really try to embody a blend of depth and openness in the way that we approach learning at Hebrew College and the way that we approach service to the community. And this goes back to that notion of sort of the wide tent, open doors, but for people who want to dive in, real depth. Depth of learning, depth of connection, depth of reflection and spiritual search. And that balance, everything's a balancing act, but that balance really feels very, very central to who we are and what we're doing. The one other thing I'll say about healing and hope in our time, because, when I said that, or, when I wrote that, it was partly, it's against the backdrop of a world that is, in so many ways, increasingly polarized, increasingly divided. So the message, for me personally, one of the messages again and again with our students is to keep working to humanize everyone we interact with, to keep reaching across those divides and say, who is this human being standing in front of me, this Tselem Elohim, this image of God? And part of what that means is recognizing that people are more than one thing. Don't flatten anyone into just one category or one idea that they have, or, but try to really stay open to the fullness of who they are, which is such an essential part of, I think, what Torah asks us to do again and again. So,
well, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think the founders in 1921 would be pleased with what is happening today.
I hope so.
I think so. And here's to the next 100 years. Let's see what happens. At least here's to the next few months of a very successful centennial. And really, thank you so much, Sharon, for taking the time and bringing us into your building, in a sense. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anisfeld is president of the Hebrew College, which is marking its centennial year. We thank her for being with us today on JBS. And thanks, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, JBS Managing Director, Dara Golub, to our technical manager, Michael Paley, transmission manager, Jonathan McDevitt, our producer, Carol Lilienthal, and thank you for watching In the News here on JBS. Be well.